Can I name drop Conan? Can I name drop a few groups? Because I know we're not, we don't
let me name drop this first one. Yeah, I have a question about it because I want to see if this was or something, right? So Van Halen, right? And when they came out with MTV, when MTV came out, was Van Halen in your mind the first band? Because we saw the videos and that they were portrayed as party rockers and just super cool. Was there a band before that kind of created that wow, it's Van Halen it's really cool to be a rock and roll star, because you show Eddie, what's his name? He's wearing the towel, they push right. So Van Halen. Well, go ahead, Mark.
I think that even predates MTV for Van Halen.
Right.
I thought they always had that going for them. I thought they used the rock and roll magazines like Cream and Hit Parader to their advantage at a time when that mattered.
You see that? Look at that, Mark.
That's amazing.
They're back. Cream's back.
I've often said if I could pick one job to have from throughout history, I would either want to be a writer for Cream magazine during its peak or for National Lampoon magazine during its peak.
Wow.
Yeah. The thing, there's not another band, with the exception of maybe the Stones, where you have when you think of a party, Van Halen. If someone says Van Halen, your instantly connotation is a party. There's no other band it's such a cool fucking name, and it's one of those names like Gretzky. There's no other Gretzky family on the planet, right? There's no Van Halen. I never met hey, my name's Dave Van Halen. And grade 3 or something. There's only 2 guys in the world, or 3 now, that are named Van Halen as far as I'm concerned. And it's just got this connotation of fun and fucking great times and a party. And whether it's Roth or Sammy, and people that don't like Sammy Hagar can suck a dick because he's fucking amazing. And that material that they did during his time was incredible as well. I think, and Madden might argue this with Aerosmith. I think Van Halen could be the greatest American rock and roll band of all time.
Well, I think it's Van Halen or Aerosmith 1, 2, and I won't argue any way you say.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe Kiss or but Van Halen is the only thing about Van Halen to me that's a drag is their material that they released over the last 20 years of Eddie's life is very minimal. They put out one really good record, A Different Kind of Truth. But before that, they hadn't had anything in 10 years and nothing 10 years after. So their material slowed down. But if you're going from 78 to 95, that's the greatest American rock and roll band of all time.
Let me throw a song out there that's polarizing because I want to know if you guys like it or not. The only Van Halen song I did not like, not a fan of Jump.
I love it.
Do you really? I'm not. I thought it just sounded so. I was like, that's kind of like a, that's just me. I'm not.
Yeah, but once again, that was another gateway song that a lot of people got into Van Halen, and it goes to show once again the diversity of change of putting out a song based around a keyboard riff for the greatest guitar player of all time was very strange. Super catchy song. The guitar solo on that is next level amazing. But that was like an Enter Sandman for Van Halen that really took him to the next level, which was crazy because 3 months later, Roth quit the band. So that's a good thing about this. They get as big as it ever been, and your singer quits. What do you do?
Yeah. And when Jump came out, I was 6 or 7 years old, and I was a product of the MTV generation. And that's my first exposure to Van Halen, the first song I heard. So hearing the song and hearing Eddie Van Halen play guitar was mind blowing, and seeing Dave do jump splits and kip ups on stage. It took me, man. And I was like, well, I'm a Van Halen guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had just moved to California, and the guy that I drove to work with, because I was in the military, I was stationed here in San Diego. So we had this thing that going to work, we listened to hip hop, and coming back, we listened to rock. Right. And he was the first one that put me on to Van Halen. And since they're from California, they were all over the place. I thought David Lee Roth is one of the greatest frontmen of all time.
Absolutely.
Charismatic.
Yeah, of course he is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He created the thing almost people would dress up like this guy at Halloween.
Yeah.
The first guy, right? Yeah. A rocker.
There's a good question. That's a good transition to a topic. Who's the best frontman of all time? The best frontman?
I mean, I don't want to get too, like a shill, but I got to go with Mick Jagger, man. Because like we just talked about, he's still the best front man 60 years in. Roth really deteriorated in his later years. If you saw like a recent, like the Van Halen reunion in 2015, Roth barely moved. Like I remember, it was awful. Like you said, it was terrible. He had a little like slidey carpet thing where he would slide back and forth. And I'm talking 2 feet. And they would replay it on the Tron as if he was doing a fucking split jump off the drum rise. So I was like, this is terrible. What happened to Time and Dave? Like,
but I think we can all agree, young Roth, you can put up against him.
I agree. Hands down, 1,000%.
Right, like a certain time period,
yes.
David Lee Roth is saying, but for longevity, if you look at the thing, it's got to be, like you said, he's 80 years old, he's still selling out of rhythm.
You know who I would throw in there is Freddie Mercury.
Of course.
100%.
I think the total package, that's the guy.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. What a showman.
Paul Stanley, great front man. But the thing with Paul is Paul has a guitar. It's a different dynamic.
Tougher, right, Chris?
That's right.
We haven't mentioned the
Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden, amazing frontman to this day. That's another band that's top 3 for me is Iron Maiden. Still at the top of the game. Ozzy, great frontman, absolutely good call.
Right.
Rob Halford.
Would you consider you guys Prince rock and roll?
Yeah, of course.
That's a great frontman right there.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. We haven't mentioned go ahead, Chris, sorry.
Go ahead.
We haven't mentioned the Who at all, and I just wanted to say that because one of the best shows I've ever seen was in 2002. I saw the Who, and Daltrey. I'm not sure how old he was then, but he was incredible at that time. But what a great show the Who.
Yeah, and that's what the thing with the Who, like, because I saw them in like 15, and they were really good. And you're talking about a band that's in their 70s. Just imagine them in the 60s. How fucking insane they were with Keith Moon, and John Entwistle as well. What a great band, and I'd almost say a little underrated when you talk about great rock and roll bands with diversity up the fucking ass. I mean, there's so much different style of Who material, plus with the concept records with Tommy, Quadrophenia. Like they were a thinking man's heavy rock band. But that's one of the greatest rhythm sections of all time as well when you talk about John Entwistle and Keith Moon. What a fucking psycho Keith Moon was.
And with Entwistle and Patterson being really the timekeepers and Moon almost being lead drums.
Right. And you want to talk about Keith Moon ran over his chauffeur and killed him, drove a car into a swimming pool, set a bomb on his drum kit on the Ed Sullivan Show that was so loud it made him deaf. John Entwistle literally died with hookers and blow in a Las Vegas hotel room. I mean, what more do you want?
You know what's funny, Chris? That's great. You know what's funny, though? When you mention Ed Sullivan, I'm sure you've heard this story, but it's worth repeating. I love when the Doors went on Ed Sullivan. They told them not to repeat the "you don't want to get high" line.
Girl, get much higher. Yeah.
Right. And they go into the room and they go, "You will never do the Ed Sullivan Show again." He goes, "We just did the Ed Sullivan Show." How great is that?
Yeah.
A couple of guys I want to mention too are Robert Plant, obviously a great frontman. And to this day, the stuff he does, the real bluesy stuff with Alison Krauss, is not Zeppelin, but it's excellent. It's Robert Plant at the twilight, very sophisticated and dignified. I'm a big David Coverdale fan, Chris. You know that, with Purple and White Snake. And we haven't mentioned Ronnie Dio, who I think arguably has the best voice in that history.
Yeah, somebody, Bono, Jim Morrison.
Yeah, Bono's great. Well, Bono's a great frontman too.
Right, yeah.
You too. I mean, like you said, there's so much to cover here. U2 is another one of those bands like Zeppelin and the Beatles that are so eclectic with their style. Always good. Their new song, whatever the fuck it's called, they played at the Sphere in Vegas, is a great tune. Here's the thing that I really like. I've always loved U2, but I got a real good appreciation for them when I went and saw them at the Sphere. I don't know if you guys went, but the Sphere, for people, obviously you've heard of it. When you go inside, the production is insane. It's next level. It's fucking crazy. The sound is great. Here's what I loved about it, though. You got to be a great rock and roll band to make that work. U2 was playing on a stage that was about this big. There was no amps on stage. There's nothing. To not get totally dwarfed and eclipsed by the production and all the images that are going on this fucking giant sphere, you got to be good. And they commanded that little wee stage as if it was a stadium. And I was watching the production, but I was like, if this thing fucking shut off and it was just you two on that stage, I'd still be going crazy for this. Like, that's how much of a vibe and the aura that they have. Edge as a guitar player is next level because every song has a different sound to it, guitar wise. Right. I mean, that's got to be one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time, right there as well.
I'd put Axl on the list.
Hey guys, I gotta go because I gotta go do the radio show.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Great seeing everybody. This sounds like a great segment, Jericho. I'll get a hold of you.
Sounds good, Mark. Thanks, man.
See you,
Thanks,
Mark.
I just wanted to say, the only reason Axl I wouldn't say is because his output. You know, as far as a lot of people know, he was gone for 20 years, which he wasn't. But, you know, the reason I put him up there is because he was able to slide into AC/DC. And who would have thought, you know, anybody could do that, let alone Axl, who had, you know, a bad reputation at the time.
Axl has a presence that is just, he's one of one, dude. Yeah, Axl just has.
You know what Axl reminds me of, Frankie, or all you guys will. He's like Jeff Hardy. He's got an aura and a presence to him. His talking is not good, but he doesn't have to talk. Axl doesn't talk on stage. He didn't have to. He's just fucking Axl. He reminds me a lot of Jeff in that respect. You just see Jeff, you're like, this guy's cool. And Axl has that same vibe. You know, Bon Scott was like that too, because Malcolm Young hated singers that talked on stage. And Malcolm was Angus Young's brother, who was the leader of the band. It wasn't Angus's band. It was always Malcolm's band. Bon Scott had that presence, and to an extent, Brian has it as well, where you just see these guys and like Bon Scott's lyrics, like there's a wet patch on her seat. Is that Coca-Cola? And he's like his lyrics, I can see him living them. Like all of his lyrics are about things that really happen, like whole lot
stream of consciousness stuff.
Yeah, like, you know, he really banged some huge chick and wrote a song about her.
Rosie, yeah.
He's such a pirate, you know, like I just love his vibe. And he's another guy that died way too young, but he almost had to. Like that was his legacy of being this lecherous pirate rock and roll guy. And that's just one of the greatest all-time bands, AC/DC.
Going back to what you said, if you're not a Roth guy, go fuck yourself. Or if you're not a Hagar guy, I hate that people try to split it into, are you a Bon Scott or a Brian Johnson guy? Yeah. Are you a Hagar or a Roth guy? It's like, dude, we got great fucking records from both guys.
Yeah,
both, and they're different, but it's the same heart. It's like same heart and soul of the band. Like I love all iterations of both those bands.
Let me ask you guys a quick question here. It's kind of like an outside the box hair metal band that you're a fan of growing up. Like I want to know, like what you consider. To me, I used to love Slaughter.
Yeah.
There's, you know, like a band like that. What you ever know like a band like Slaughter that like wasn't really, they were like a B band, they weren't an A band, you know.
The first Slaughter album, there's a group of them that came out of time. Slaughter, Firehouse, Trickster, and Warrant all released great first albums. It's Skid Row, first and second albums, and then the music scene changed when Nirvana came, who's another great band that we could discuss. But when Nirvana came, it killed all those bands. So they had great first records and sometimes great second records, but nobody cared at that point in time because the music industry switched like that. Yeah. When Nirvana became big, everybody suffered. The only band that actually Guns N' Roses and Metallica were the two of the few
Aerosmith
heavy metal bands that were able to adapt. The rest of them were literally slaughtered. They were gone here today, gone later today, as Dave used to say. But every band got, like Iron Maiden got it, and Priest got it. Like like fucking people got hurt by this shit that happened, you know.
Rat and Quiet Riot were two of my favorite hair metal bands. And I think their shit holds up, man.
It does. It does.
And let me just say real quick, Jericho, everybody here really. Prince, to me, you know, the fact that he played all the instruments, he wrote all the album art, he told everybody how they had to dress. Bro, I just think he's always been an underrated guitarist, and I think everybody saw how badass he was in that fucking Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when he went in there with all those fucking, you know, with Petty.
While My Guitar Gently Weeps with Tom Petty and all those, and George Harrison.
That was ridiculous, dude.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was when George got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame posthumously, or no, maybe it was a George Harrison tribute, whatever it was. He plays the solo for While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and my favorite thing about the whole thing, by the way, he looks like a badass. He's got a fucking red pip suit and a hat on. And shit.
No, it's
And if you guys go back and watch that, at the very end, he throws his guitar up into the air, and it never comes down.
Never comes down. Yeah.
Where did it go?
How great was that? Or when he fell into the crowd and they had to hold him back up and push him back up into the thing. That's just losing yourself, and you know what I'm saying?
I love Prince as well, in that he would just show up in a city. I remember he did it in Calgary. Radio comes on 8:00 in the morning. Oh, we just got news that Prince is playing the Saddle Dome tonight. Tickets go on sale in an hour.
He did that a lot.
18,000 people sold out like that. And then he went downtown to some little shitty little blues bar and got up on stage and played till 3 or 4 in the morning. Then, like, the guy just loved to play.
He did that a lot. Yeah. Not only that, bro, major hits for Sheena Easton, the Bangles, the Time. I mean, he was just great. But in that same vein, here's somebody I want to bring up, especially for the younger listeners that are listening to us and don't know a lot about them. Bro, Jimi Hendrix. How revolutionary. How incredible was he? But let me tell you, and I know you know this, Jericho. One of the things that fascinated me is he had such a buzz that when he went to England, the Beatles went to see him, the Rolling Stones went to see him. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was getting love from all these fucking artists because he was like one of the first guys to actually get the guitar with the feedback and the distortion, and you
talk about a game changer. He's another one that I would put in there, much like we mentioned Nirvana, Guns N' Roses, or Metallica, Van Halen. The thing about Jimmy, so you always got to put yourself into the time that he existed, right? So if you listen to, like, I don't know, let's say Fire, or Purple Haze, let's say, just take Purple Haze, everyone knows that. Imagine that the epitome of guitar solos up until then is George Harrison, Pete Townsend, Dave Davies of the Kinks. Guys are playing solos that pretty much match the melody of the song. Bow now 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 now. But the Hard Day's Night solo. Bow now 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 now. That's a guitar solo. It's a good one. Fucking then Hendrix comes out with the wah-wah and the effects and just the fucking speed and the technique, and you're like, who is this guy? Now, here we are in 2024 talking about it. Yeah, it's Hendrix. But put yourself into the time and just imagine how fucking badass he was, just blowing people away with this style of playing that no one had ever seen before. I always equate it to, like, Back to the Future, when Marty McFly goes on stage and plays the Van Halen solo at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Right? Your kids are going to love it. Trust me. I feel that Hendrix was almost a time traveler that came in the same way. Like, okay, hold on, trust me, you guys are going to understand this in a couple of years.
Plus, much like you were bringing up the guy that reminds you of Jeff Hardy. Who were you saying?
Axl.
Bro, he had that cool vibe that you're just born with. Yeah, that's all there is to it. You know what I'm saying?
Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen did more to popularize the electric guitar than arguably anybody else, other than, like, Les Paul, the guy.
Can I say one more guy that's very, very underrated, but you will agree with me? Carlos Santana.
Yeah.
Santana.
He was the first guy that brought in that African rhythms with and instruments
Latino.
that had never been played, like, the timbales and the congas. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
He totally has that. And the other guy I'll throw in from the heavy metal side, Frankie, is Randy Rhoads. He played on the first two Ozzy records, great. Crazy Train. So what Eddie was popularizing kind of the party technical guitar, Randy brought in the classical vibe that a lot of guys started using. We talked about Michael Schenker earlier. He's kind of started that, but Randy took it to the next level. Those two guys shaped rock guitar for the 80s, 90s, and to where we are now.
There's a question, and this is my favorite. He brought up Carlos Santana. Is the guitar solo of Black Magic Woman the greatest of all time?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's the greatest from my perspective because I'm more of a metal guy, But it's what a great solo. And you talk about the congas and timbales and the keyboard and all that shit.
Unique, just one of the most unique ones of all time.
Of course. And here's another thing you can attribute to Santana that you guys might not know. Guess who was in Santana's band when he was like 16 years old? Neil Schon from Journey. He wrote a little song called Don't Stop Believing. And Greg Raleigh, was the keyboard player, was also in the first version of Journey. So Greg and Neil learned from Carlos. And then when Carlos got a new band, they went to form Journey, which, of course, is another one of the biggest and greatest rock and roll bands of all time.
You know, we never mentioned Pink Floyd. And the only reason I thought, because David Gilmour is a guitar player, and Comfortably Numb solo, I think you could put up there in your top 10 or somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's tough to
this is a
put a number to it. But
this is a question for Chris and Frankie, okay? When you listen to artists that when they made their music, they were obviously, you know, on substances, right? And then you listen to them when they're older and they're not on substances anymore. Can you see a clear distinction? Or no? Or do you think they were more creative when they were on drugs or not on drugs?
It's tough to say, man, because like, you know, you take like somebody like a Jimi Hendrix or a Randy Rhoads, and those guys didn't last long enough for them to be like Randy Rhoads wasn't a necessarily drug guy. But my point being, like, they weren't around long enough to where you could compare it. Like my favorite solo of all time.
Guys you could compare.
Yeah, I mean, so like I'm going by like my favorite band is obviously Metallica. So I'm thinking Kirk Hammett, and Kirk was never like necessarily a hard drug guy. He dabbled, I'm sure, just like everybody did. But like, you know, his solos to me are still timeless and still the same. But I mean, like, I don't know. I think the guys that were dabbling in those substances and got that creativity because of said substances, you know, I think that the original feel is always there, even when they play it in their later years and they are of clear and present mind. I think the feel of the original idea is still there. I don't see much of a difference.
Okay, so let's go back to Van Halen. So I saw Eddie, and Eddie was not Eddie was a complicated guy and had a lot of issues over the years. And I've seen Van Halen at his peak where you're like, oh my God, this is the greatest guitar player ever lived. And I've seen Eddie where he was fucking bad. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, when Van Halen reunited with Sammy in 2005, I went to the gig, and Sammy's a friend of mine. He's a wrestling fan, or he was a boxer. Sammy Hagar used to be a boxer, so he appreciates what we do. And he goes, dude, come under the stage during Eddie's solo. He goes, if he comes on stage with his hair in a samurai ponytail, he's fucking fucked up. You don't want to see his solo. Come under the stage and hang out. If he comes on stage with normal hair, he's fine. Because at this point in time, if you see, he was super rail thin, teeth were fucked up. Yeah. He was on some shit, like whether it was meth or whatever it was. So Eddie comes on stage with the samurai. I'm like, okay. So I went down and hung under Sammy's stage. He's got beanbag chairs and lava lamps and do some tequila with fucking Sammy and Mike underneath the stage. And I went back as Eddie was finishing his solo. And as he finished it up, he went, well, that was the shits. And I was like, it's the greatest guitar player of all time, saying in the mic that, oh, I just played like shit. Sorry, guys. So he was definitely like that, to where if he had a bad night, the magic wasn't quite there.
Yeah, there's been some pretty wacky Slash solos back in his altered days too. Right. Sometimes where he was saying and doing just weird shit. It's like,
yeah, you're right. That's a good point. That's another guy, Slash and Duff, who are so much better players now than they were back then because they got sober.
Yeah, for sure.
Chris, give me your biggest mark out moment of somebody that you met that you were like, oh my God, I'm finally meeting this guy.
I mean, there's a lot of them, because you talk about your heroes. Like when we opened for Iron Maiden in LA, that was the fucking biggest moment for me as a teen. Touring Australia with Metallica was cool. So getting to know like these guys as your friends.
How long ago was that? When did you tour
Metallica or Maiden? Metallica was 2012. Maiden was 2019.
How long was your tour in Australia?
6 shows. It was a festival tour, but Metallica was the headliner, so we were all together the whole time.
That must have been awesome.
It was
because we love Australia. Like, you know, like could you imagine, like, like the best ever.
If it wasn't that far, I'd live
favorite band, right? You know,
The guy that I met that blew my mind was Keith Richards. And I before Jimmy Fallon started on the Tonight Show, he used to have a lot of wrestlers on. He loved wrestling. And I did his show maybe 3 or 4 times. And so we weren't friends, but it was like, we'd have chats and hang out for a bit. And he goes, hey, are you around on Monday? Because we had WrestleMania on Sunday in New Jersey. I go, yeah. He goes, Keith's on the show. If you come by, I'll introduce you to him. And I'm like, is this some Hollywood bullshit, or are you telling the truth? He goes, no, I will introduce you to him. Long story short, there's a whole long story, but I don't want to tell the whole thing. I get to 30 Rock. I go upstairs. Rodman's there. I'm talking to Rodman. Jimmy comes in, and this is right when Rodman, remember, he called like fucking the president to stop a war between Korea and America.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So he's telling me the story, and Jimmy comes in. He goes, he's here, Chris. Come on. Hi, Dennis. And I'm like, well, I guess Rodman's not invited. So I go in this room, and it's a small little room, and standing there, fucking Keith Richards, man. And he's like sitting there, and he's like, Jimmy's like, hey, Keith, I didn't know you were here because I couldn't smell any cigarette smoke. He's like, man, I got this new ashtray, man. You put the cigarette on it, it sucks the smoke down. And I was like, look, my grandma had one of those in the 70s.
Yeah, right.
But he was super cool and the nicest guy. And, like, you know, and Jimmy's like, oh, yeah, he just wrestled last night at MetLife Stadium. He's like, oh, man, that's a great room, man. It's a great room. The stadium's a great room, right?
Okay.
Fucking, he's like, he had merch shirts. He's like, what size are you, man? I'm like, I'm large. He goes, take a medium too. Give it to your grandma. She'll know who I am. He's just like you would expect. He was the fucking coolest guy. And Jimmy goes, hey, do you mind if we take a picture with you and Chris? Like, I never would have asked. But Jimmy did. I got this fucking awesome picture of me and Keith Richards. And it was a cool moment to where if I ever saw him again, I bet you he would remember, because we hung out for a while at Jimmy Fallon, you know? So that was a cool moment for me.
Have you been able to meet anybody, Frankie?
So I've met Kirk Hammett from Metallica twice.
How was that?
One time backstage at a show, one time at a con we were both on, and awesome dude. He could not have been nicer. Just a sweetheart. I also, on the first time I met Rob Trujillo, who's the bass player for Metallica. Both guys we're just brothers, just dudes, and just talking, and super cool. And I always say, there's not many guys I'd mark out to meet other than like Stallone and Arnold and a couple. James Hetfield I'd love to meet, and Lars, obviously. Those two guys were great. And then these two guys happened because of wrestling, because back in the day, I always did extra work for WWF in Los Angeles or Anaheim. And these guys would come to the show every time. One was Zach Wilde, who's lead singer of Black Label Society, Ozzy Osbourne's guitars, who's also
Pantera's guitarist.
Yeah, Pantera's guitars.
Yeah.
And so they would always come to the shows, and Motorhead. So I got to meet Lemmy, being backstage doing extra work at WWF, which was, for Lemmy, for me, was like, was like, you know, I hold Lemmy in God status. So that was super, super cool. And he was just nice. It's like, hey, how are you? You know,
he's the best.
20 seconds, but like, for me, it was everything, man.
Yeah, Lemmy was a gentleman, man. He was a good dude. That's another band to mention. Motorhead as being a pioneering band, with Lemmy being the ultimate rock and roller, man. What a fucking great guy he was, and a great example of always be cool to everybody, man. No matter who you are, just be cool. Lemmy was cool to everyone. Friendly.
You know
nice.
what's funny, Jericho? I'm sure you've heard of him. You know who Too Short is?
Cocktails.
Oh yeah.
You know, blow the whistle, bitch. You know,
Cocktails.
Hey,
Cuss words.
Yeah, he made famous bitch, you know, in his songs, right?
Right.
And so he's from Oakland, and so there's this rapper called Baby Bash. I doubt you know him either. And so I had gone with him to the show. He called me up when he come to San Diego, and he goes, "Hey, bro," he goes, "Too Short's gonna be there, right?" And I was like, "Really?" So we went, and bro, it was just because most of the artists that went that day, it was like a big musical fest, so there was a lot of artists that were coming up on stage. I was just peeping game, and like all the artists were a little bit standoffish, or they had security around them. They really didn't want nobody fucking with them, bro. And Too Short came in, and he had like all these bodyguards, but they were like 16 years old. That was like, what? And they were really young guys. And I'm thinking to myself, these guys must be some badasses if they're fucking Too Short security, bro. And he came in, I kid you not, there was like this, like a walkway, and there were just fans and people on either side, bro. And he stopped to say hi to everybody. How you doing? You want a picture? And he won over everybody. Like if you weren't a Too Short fan, you became one afterwards.
Yeah.